I am always really impressed by people who make fursuits.
Fursuits, I know, right? Like, those things are amazing.
Yeah, it's, and when you know a little bit about, like, how costumes are made, you're like, holy shit, they're so impressive.
They really
Mascot
are.
suits are really fucking hard to make.
Yeah. No, I'm, like, especially the head part. And that's, like, the part that is the most, you know, unique.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I have the same color fur on my body, but, like, literally from the neck down, every fursuit is the same.
I mean, I've seen some that have, like, cool moving tails.
Sure, yeah.
And, like cool-looking hoofs or beast feet or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
But really, it's all in the head.
It is. Just movie-quality costuming made by a 21-year-old in their apartment. Like, So needless to say, I think there's some furries on my Twitter feed who have the wrong impression about me, mostly because I'm like, no, I think your work's really cool. I'm never buying one of these. Don't.
Yeah, it's not for me. That doesn't mean I don't think it's cool.
Cool, yeah. Anyway. This brought to you by cool shit on my Twitter feed, as opposed to bullshit on my Twitter feed.
Bullshit. Oh, there's so much bullshit.
It's just like, this bitch made werewolf legs. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to a new bonus experience series.
Maybe start that over when you're not giggling.
No. Welcome to a new bonus experience series. Friend of the show and repeat guest Danielle Lozon has signed on with us to do a however many episode we feel like series where we're gonna go deep, and I didn't say it weird this time, on one mechanical topic.
Deep.
As always, we are two queer women speaking with authority about games. And yes, we are still going to swear.
You can go and die mad about it.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, you want to say the die mad about it
part.
I do. You do.
I do.
You know who we are. Do you want to flex?
Oh, yeah. I'm Danielle Lozon. Woo! You can't see my awesome designer muscles, so I'll tell you all about them. I'm a game designer and developer. I work mostly with Onyx Path Publishing. I am the systems lead for Trinity Continuum. I develop lots of games over there. I also do a lot of freelance writing for other companies, such as Magpie and Green Ronin, and sometimes Third Eye Games, although it's been a while since I've done stuff with them. Although I'm sure if I was like, let me write something for Pip, they would just be like, yeah, okay. But they also hire a lot of new folks and give them opportunities, and I don't want to take those people's opportunities away from them. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So that's me.
That's you. You're very cool.
Thanks.
I'm impressed. Senpai noticed me.
Oh. I'm blushing.
And we are on video chat, audience at home, so... God.
Yeah.
You know who I am. You've been listening to the show for a while, and if you haven't, I am also a freelancer for the Onyx Path. I do that almost pretty exclusively, which is mostly just because I haven't made an effort to do anything else. Maybe I should, whatever. But I am one of the developers for Scion 2nd Edition, and I'm also on the development staff for Exalted 3rd Edition, and you may know me from being chaotic in the unofficial Exalted Discord as the Exalted Essence mechanical developer. And Dee and I have worked together on an awful lot of things.
Yeah, an awful lot.
An awful lot.
So many things, it's become awful.
No, working with you is never awful.
Thank you for inviting me on this show so you can dump me.
I was gonna say not be unable to stop flirting with you.
I mean that too.
I do appreciate you stepping in and helping out while Ray gets her life together.
Look, I've been there. I know.
Yeah.
We've all been there before.
Fortunately, neither of us have 2 teenagers to wrangle, so...
Oh my god. I can't imagine going through schooling right now. And
Me neither.
Like, with teenagers or even small children. Like, I just can't. I did it for one day and I was done. And, like, all of the mothers and fathers and parents out there who are taking care of small kids while they're in school during this pandemic, like, I fucking salute you.
Yeah, for real. So I'm sorry if you can hear this, but they're doing yard work right outside my window. So if there's some sort of mechanical noise in the background, I think it's a leaf blower. I'm not sure.
It sounds a little like this.
So today we're doing another topic of things that were on my mind lately, which was as I am developing Essence, which is a product intended for new people, a thing I am not. I have been thinking about books, and especially RPG books specifically.
Yeah. Not novels, clearly.
I would hope not books in general that present their material in a way that's good for beginners, which unfortunately led me to go take a look at the D&D 5th edition PHB, because so many people have gotten into it. It's been like a gateway drug for lots of people I know, and lots of really cool people I know. I say that like cool people didn't play D&D previously.
They didn't.
But
Said they didn't. Nobody cool played D&D until like 5 years ago.
5 years ago, it's true. Kind of. Sorry, everybody who I was friends with.
Including me.
Yeah, including you and myself.
Yeah.
People who I don't know that the game would have appealed to previously.
Sure.
Which I find really interesting. And I suspect that things like the Adventure Zone and Dimension 20 and Critical Role are a big driving factor in that. But that's not really what we're talking about today.
No.
Maybe that can be another episode.
Yeah. That is a whole other episode.
So, like, there are all these new people, and all these new people who would maybe not have been the audience previously who are now picking this up, so the book has to be doing something right, because it's not pushing people away.
Right. It's a first exposure thing.
Right.
Which, you know, a game like D&D has a lot of... I think it has something going for it that a lot of other games don't, is that when you get your first exposure to D&D, you don't get it by picking up the book.
Mm-hmm.
You get it through, like you said, all these Adventure Zone, Critical Role, Stranger Things. You see people playing it, or somebody you know is playing it and tells you about it, and then you go get a book. This is not your first exposure, though, the book. The book is maybe second, third exposure.
Yeah, I suppose you're correct. So, but I wanted to examine the PHB and the question of, like, hey, does anybody actually learn games by reading the book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real question.
Right. Or is the hobby basically carried on oral tradition?
Oh, man. I don't know that we can answer this, but we're going to explore it, because I think that it's an interesting thing to talk about in this matter. So let's talk about the 5th edition PHB. This is supposedly the book that you need to read to make a character, to be the player in a game. Ostensibly, you don't need to read the DMG. You don't need to read the monster manual. Those are for your GM. All you need to read is the PHB, and honestly, you don't even need to read the whole thing. You just need to read enough to know where to go next.
Right.
The book is more like a guidebook than a novel, like mini game books are. And I look at this book, and the introduction, honestly, I think the introduction does a decent job of explaining what kind of game you're about to play.
Okay.
It tells you that it's swords and sorcery. It
Okay.
tells you that it's role-playing. It tells you that there's one person who is going to run the game, and it tells you that there are other people who are going to play characters in the game, and that this game may take many sessions.
Okay.
It then tells you that there are monsters, that there's a multiverse of game worlds that you could play in that are connected to each other. It tells you that, it tells you how to use the book, like why, how it's divided up. And it does a very brief, how to play, explaining the dice, explaining some of the very basic rules in D20, and how to do an adventure.
Okay.
Which honestly, up until this point, I never felt like D&D actually told you up front what the game you were about to play was going to be. People just kind of assumed that you knew. So I actually feel like this introduction is pretty good for new players to kind of like, what is this?
Yeah,
Right?
I feel like 4th edition did something very similar.
I think they did. Yeah, I think after 3rd edition, D&D kind of learned its lesson of like we should maybe tell people what they're about to be doing.
But I can also confirm, because I read it very recently, that the Rules Cyclopedia, so like the ultimate edition of basic D&D, like classic D&D, also tells you very clearly what the game is about.
Okay, that's
and how
good.
to play it. Like the very first thing is very clearly like, this is what a role-playing game is. This is how you roll your dice. You will need a pencil and some friends. And then goes into some very basic stuff. Very
no
similar
paper,
to
just pencils.
just a pencil and a friend.
friends.
That's right on your friends. That's my own chaotic brain deleting important parts of information.
I like it though. Just a
pencil and some friends.
So yeah, this introduction, it's only a few pages long. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long. Gives you some really, really basic information, and then the very next thing you do is start making a fucking character.
Yeah.
And this is really to the fucking point.
How do you feel about that?
Well, so I am being told I need to choose a race. I need to choose a class. I need to determine some ability scores. I need to describe my character. I need to choose some equipment, and then I need to get together so that we can play a game.
Right. That last part's the hardest one.
It is. Absolutely. Characters all day long, but if I don't have a pencil and some friends, never gonna happen.
That's the title of this episode.
Pencil
and some friends.
So the problem with this is that I can already see is that I don't know what the races are and I don't know what the classes are.
Okay. So I couldn't find my copy of the PHB, which I do know we own, but H was playing in a 5th edition game for a while, which means who the fuck knows where the book went. Yeah, I'm calling you out. Does the race section start with a rundown?
No.
No, not at all. Just here's a dwarf.
Yeah,
deal with it.
No, it doesn't. So it's a race section. Okay, so when we get into races, it is kind of like it's its own chapter, and it talks about how to choose races and what the traits are and describes that. But I'm talking about chapter 1, which just tells you how to make a character. This is ostensibly the chapter that you need to look at first to know how to build a character.
You know what?
But really,
I'm gonna pause you for 1 sec because I'm gonna grab my 4th edition book and let's see if it's different.
Oh, okay.
Okay, fortunately for me, that was right on my bookshelf. That was not far away.
I'm pretty sure it does the same thing.
Okay. All right, let's see. So we start with this really pretty 2-page picture spread of some adventurers doing some cool looking shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of art in these books that really sells what you're doing.
Yeah, so there's a little imagine a world of bold warriors, mighty wizards, and terrible monsters on this first page. Then it goes into what a role-playing game is, talks about... This version calls it a fantastic world, as opposed to specifically calling out swords and sorcery.
Sure, okay.
Talks about the whole points of light thing, which I liked, don't at me. A sidebar on the history of D&D, which I think is cool.
Yeah, that is actually pretty cool. Do I have a sidebar here? There's not really a sidebar about the history of D&D. D&D's brand new in 5th edition. Don't care about the history of it.
Yep. I actually thought for some of its other faults, teaching you how to play the game was not one of them.
No.
So it has a specific paragraph on player characters first, because this is the PHB. Then a section on the DM. Which describes the DM as an adventure builder, a narrator, a monster controller, and a referee.
Oh, that's nice.
Then it talks about adventures.
Sure.
Then it talks about needing game books and dice, a pencil and some friends. Then it has a whole nother header on how do you play, and then talks about like combat and dealing with puzzles or obstacles as non-combat encounters, and then talks about exploration, and then breaks down how to take your turn, and then goes into the core mechanic, which is very easy. Like talking about, I'm sure that's not different. That's pretty much exactly the same.
But, yeah, that core mechanic has been the same for a very long time.
And then 4th edition talks about has a whole section called 3 basic rules.
Yeah, there is the 3 pillars of adventure: exploration, social interaction, and combat.
Oh, no, this says simple rules, many exceptions. So every class, race, feat, power, and monster in the D&D game lets you break the rules in some way. These can be in very minor ways. These exceptions can also appear in very significant ways. All these game elements are little ways of breaking the rules, and most of these books published for the D&D game are full of these game elements. So it's basically describing what powers are.
Ah, yes, because in D&D 4th edition, power, we're not comparing editions right here.
No. We're comparing how the 2 games present material.
Right.
This is not an edition war, my friends. This is simply a discussion of how it presents material. Then a follow-up rule that says specific beats general. So if a specific rule contradicts a general rule, the specific rule wins.
Right, which is always a good thing to talk about, especially in a game that has a lot of powers that are... The whole point of the power is to manipulate the rules.
Right. Yeah. And then always round down. So anytime you have something, you round it down. And then the next page is making characters.
Cool. Yeah, I thought that was true. So we get into making characters, and this is a thing that I think D&D does in an interesting way. And I don't know that this actually helps new people, because this is a thing that I find myself having problems with when I am making a character in D&D, and I've been doing this for far too many years. Some number of years. Years. Decades. So,
at this point, yeah.
Yeah, at this point. So the thing is that the most important part of this chapter, this how to make a character chapter, is the steps: choose a race, choose a class, choose, determine ability scores, describe your character, move on. Like, that's literally it. Those are the 3 steps of making a character.
Right.
There are actually a few other steps, but they're very minuscule.
So does the 5th edition book just have it 3 steps?
No.
Okay, good.
After determine ability scores, it's describe your character, choose equipment, and then and that's it.
Okay. Interesting, also in a point of comparison, that 4th edition basically has on... So the next page after I said with the 3 basic rules is another beautiful 2-page spread that has a little intro that breaks down everything that's in the chapter. And then it has a little blurb up front that talks about... making your own OC, basically. Yeah. and then has a bit of language which I find good and interesting, that specifically says we're writing this in the second person, and that refers to your character.
Okay, that's kind of nice. Yeah. So the first thing that I run into as a problem with this is whenever you tell me the step-by-step character creation first as its own chapter, not as okay, here's what we're moving on to, but as its own chapter is you've given me all these steps, which is fine, but honestly, this is useless to me. The only thing that's actually useful here is how to determine my ability scores, because it's only found in this chapter. Every other aspect of creating my character are found in different chapters that I have not yet read, and so cannot actually make those decisions.
Right.
So what winds up happening that I have seen a lot, and I'm not 100%. I'm not saying everybody does it this way. I'm not trying to make some kind of overall statement, but at least for my games that I have played with my friends, people will choose their race and their class first, generally, because they know already what races are available and what classes are available because of the zeitgeist of knowing D&D.
Right.
But honestly, the very first part of making a character is actually choosing ability scores.
Right.
This is the very, very first thing I see people do.
Which like does in a D&D context does seem a little bit out of step, because your ability scores tie into your class and what you want to do. So you kind of have to have I think you have to have an idea of what you want to do first, or what you want to play. So I kind of feel like, and here's where it gets sticky, because we're just using D&D as a general example.
Sure.
But like, when you are making any game, there's not really a right answer for the order in which you present this information, because you kind of have to know all of it at the same time, and you cannot just beam that directly into someone's brain. No. Because it's a book.
Right,
so you have some of it has to be out of order by nature of the way books work.
Right. So anyway, I've never encountered D&D before, and I'm picking this up just now, and I'm reading through it. I am not given I'm given a list of words. The most common player character races are dwarves, elves, halflings, and humans. Some races also have sub-races, such as mountain dwarf or wood elf.
Okay,
Chapter 2 provides more information about these races, as well as the less widespread races of dragonborn, gnomes, half-elves, half-orcs, and tieflings. I don't know what any of those words mean.
Those sure are words. Like, if I don't know what those are,
right,
I still don't know what those are.
I still don't know what those are, and I can't make a decision just based on that information, other than told, okay, I should go to Chapter 2 now and read all these things. Great. I've gone to Chapter 2, I've read up on those things, and I've picked a race.
Okay.
Great.
So let's compare for a moment, again, to the 4th edition book, which I think maybe is doing a slightly better job. But
Sure.
But let's pretend that we have never seen this before and have no opinions on it. So character creation, the actual character creation page starts with a intro paragraph that basically kind of says, think about what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely an intro paragraph. I just didn't...
Yeah, I'm sure there is. And then, but then it also, in that paragraph, sort of leans on the fact that it assumes the player has some understanding of Tolkien-esque fantasy, because it specifically says, do you like fantasy fiction featuring dwarves or elves?
Yeah, I mean, that exact line is also in the 5th edition. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that
it's just the same thing.
It's just the same thing, because they own those words and can just copy-paste.
They sure can. Then it has a 9-step breakdown where it says choose race, choose class, determine ability scores. So it puts ability scores after race and class.
Which it does in 5th edition as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Then skills, then feats, then powers, then equipment, then derived... It says fill in the numbers, which is derived stats.
Sure.
And then, fill in your character details. The what White Wolf calls the breath of life.
Yes.
Though each one of these steps does, in fact, tell you what chapter to go to, but it does not give you a page number.
Yep, there's no page number, but there's a chapter. This provides this, and all of them say which chapter to go to. Now, one of the things that is interesting on this also is that I don't know if 4th edition does it, but there is an example character build throughout this whole thing.
Okay, let's see. The first part just is, so then the next section is literally just a elevator pitch for everything that's in the book.
Because, there will be...
Here they come again.
Oh, man, I can hear them. All right, so building Brunar, each step of the character creation includes an example of that step with a player named Bob building his dwarf character Brunar. And so there's building Brunar step 1, and then building Brunar step 2, and so on and so forth. And in each of these things, it explains, honestly, you need to read this character creation but you need to read it all before you even start making a character.
Mm-hmm.
And like internalize it, and then move on to chapter 2 and actually start making a character. Is how I feel that you should really, if you've never played this game before, otherwise you're gonna be flipping back and forth a whole lot, because to be able to choose a race effectively, I really need to read about how to choose a race, go to the race section, pick one of those, read all about them, pick one, then come back and choose a class. Now, the choose a class talks about levels. It talks about hit points and hit dice. It talks about proficiency bonuses, and all of the ability score summaries. Here, there's and I think this is just because this is a sidebar and this is where it fits. But there is an ability score summary that is between. It's kind of between the class and determined ability scores, but it's on the page with determined class that goes through all of the abilities. It tells you what it measures. It tells you which classes it's important for, and which races
handy.
Give you an increase in it.
All right.
Which is nice when you're going to do ability scores. And again, if I already know all the races, and I kind of already have an idea of all the classes, I don't actually need to think about those 2 steps first. I can actually start with ability scores. And in the sense of, like, I don't have to, like, write everything down for my elf. I don't have to write everything down for my barbarian.
Right.
Instead, my elven barbarian, I'm going to roll up scores. I'm going to put them in the places that are best for barbarian. I'm going to write down my bonuses from being an elf. And then this, like, fast-ass motherfucker that comes in your face and hits you now has ability scores and the most important things about the character sheet. And then I can go fill in, like, oh, yeah, I got dark vision. And, oh, yeah, I got, like, here are my barbarian abilities, because I went to chapter 3 and pulled those things.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I'm not saying that the book should put ability scores first, because that assumes you are... Yeah, dog time, sorry.
It's okay.
It's cat time with dog nanny.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah. So, because if you put ability scores first, it would assume that you already knew everything there is to know about races and classes. But because you get such a small treatment of races and classes, but the ability scores and how to choose them, you can't look anywhere else in this book for that information. You must look in this 2-page spread.
Right. Yeah. So
like,
there's
everything
no
beyond that, though. You don't need this section for.
Yeah. So there's no, like, Bob's making a dwarf in this.
Okay.
In the character creation section, and then the next chapter is the races.
Sure.
So the character creation section here gives you an elevator pitch of the races, which does not talk about commonality, but does use a little bit of good old D&D racist language. Then it gives you a pitch of all the classes. So you can just read this and get a very brief rundown of, oh, I think Dragonborn are cool. I want to play a dragon man. I like the idea of wandering the world as a mercenary and an adventurer. They're strong and they have dragon-like abilities. I like dragons. I want to be a dragon. And then be like, oh, I think a paladin sounds neat. I want to be a divine champion. Neat.
Yeah, see, we don't get that kind of breakdown in 5e.
Yeah.
You pretty much have to go to the next chapter to read about those things.
And then on the next page, like, there's also a breakdown of role, which I'm not going to worry about. But for the purposes of making a 4th edition character, that is important. And it also does tell you which class aligns with each role.
Yes, that's good.
So that you have a like, 3rd layer of, what do I want to do? Then it breaks down the ability scores and what they're important to, including the skill checks, which is pretty cool. And then immediately following the explanation of what strength, con, dex, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are the ability scores and how to apply them. So I think that's pretty good, actually. Giving the rundown of what they're important for and how they work, and then following that up with, here's how you assign them.
Okay.
Then it has a whole section on role-playing and alignment with a little bit of deities thrown in, and I'm not sure what they're doing here, but better here than anywhere else, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
I guess that's the one decision where I'm like, you sure did put that right in the middle of the character creation section, didn't you? Then if you were like, this is boring and I don't care, and you flip past it, it talks about, like, making up a personality. Here are some questions you can ask yourself to figure out how you respond in social situations. What do you do when you have to face a tough decision? What happens if you're in a dire strait? And those are fun, but I never read them. I'm sure somebody does. And then past this, like, they have this whole thing on the gods and, like, how to play a character. And then they talk about how to make checks. And I think that this making checks section should have been slid ahead of all this, like, role-playing fluff. And followed immediately after ability scores, because those two are related.
They are, yeah. And interestingly, let me look, because I was, while you were talking, I was flipping through because I'm impatient. But, you know, we don't actually, like, in ability scores, you know, we talk about what the ability scores are, how to generate them, and write them down. And then just step 3 of building Bruner, and then there's a customizing ability scores with your point cost, and then we move straight into describing characters. So we don't actually talk about how these ability scores make checks.
Yeah. Okay.
In this section, and I actually think that's okay because this is literally just making a fucking character.
Yeah.
And there's an entire chapter about how the rules blend together.
Yeah, I'm of two minds because I'm not sure that the ability scores and checks need to be there. Because I believe there is also a playing the game chapter. Let's flip back to the table of contents.
There absolutely is.
Yeah, they're adventuring, and then there's combat and stuff. So there is not a specific, like, core rule playing the game chapter, but there is adventuring and combat, which is, you know, it's D&D, that is playing the game.
Well, right. So where in 5th edition they pulled that using the ability scores and made it its own chapter.
Oh, I mean, all
so
right.
It is chapter 7 in the 5th edition book.
Okay.
And not hidden in the character creation chapter, which I actually prefer to not have that important, like, how to make a skill check or how to make a ability score check or whatever hidden in a character creation chapter, where I think I'm done with this chapter now that I've made the character, and actually it's the rules telling me how I fucking play the game.
The annoying thing I think about, like, I think both are fine, which is why we're having this conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's totally fine to have a rundown of ability scores and making checks in your character creation section, especially for a game like D&D, because they are important to literally the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Everything after it is dependent on this.
Yes.
The problem I have with the 4th edition section is that making checks is after the shit about the gods and, like, do you want to do an accent or not, and not immediately following the ability scores. So if I were reading this for the first time, once I finished, if I'm reading this for the first time, I'm like, okay, cool, I know I want to play a Dragonborn, I like to play a Paladin, okay, now I know strength is important, I know I think charisma sounds cool, I'm gonna generate my ability scores using the array because I'm lazy.
Everybody should
always use an array. Yeah. And then I get to fill in the numbers. Oh, okay, cool. I'm done. The rest of this chapter is about the gods and how to play a character. And, like, listen, I've seen, I listened to the Adventure Zone. I think I know how to be funny. So, like, I think I'm done.
Yeah, but you're not.
But you're not.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So moving on past the character creation chapter, because I think we've talked enough about how I think this chapter is a useful chapter, right? And then we go into races, and so
then we go into races. Same.
And everything about the race is here. There's some fiction about the race.
Yep.
There's a little sidebar about how the race feels about other people. There's, you know...
Oh, we got vampire all up in here.
Yeah, they did. Like, there's so much in this book that I'm like, oh, I see you've taken some things from White Wolf.
Yeah, I see you've played Paragon of Modern Design.
Yes.
Early 2000s White Wolf.
I see you. I'm looking at you. Sorry, I'm just because there's like a how to use this book section that I don't think is in any of the previous ones.
Yeah, I did not see that. I did not see that here.
Yeah, and that's in every fucking White Wolf book. And not White Wolf book. Like, how do you use this book? What are the sections in an introduction? Like, I had never seen that in a D&D book until I saw 5th edition. I have some opinions. Maybe we'll put that in the bonus segment.
Oh, that'll be our bonus segment. Yeah. So, Fori goes right into races, gives you a cool piece of art, which 5th edition does too. Yep. Has their general racial traits, their ability score modifiers, their size, speed, languages, and their basic stuff, like racial bonuses, and power. And that is all right up front in a little sidebar next to the image. And I kind of feel like that is one of the things that I find kind of challenging, because I think that's a fine place for it, but I also feel like that's a lot of information that means nothing to someone who is coming to this having just read the previous chapter.
Yeah. So in 5th edition, you get, so dwarf, cool picture. There's some fiction that talks about like how, like there's the very first splat is header, short and stout, long memory, long grudges, clans and kingdoms, God's gold and clan. This is all very like setting fiction information. The next page has a list of common names, then all their traits, and then one subrace, the hill dwarf. Two. I missed it. Hill dwarf and mountain dwarf, and then a really small sidebar about Draugr. Or Dwergar. Sorry, I can't. And that's it. Like, so it's a 3-page spread, which Mike Chaney would murder me for. It's a 3-page splat, which we've done before, but I get the layout person gets mad about.
Right.
And then the elf, same thing. It's fiction, and then on the last page, it's traits. Actually, winds up being 4 pages. Just depends on how much fiction you want to give them.
Yeah.
And how much art you're giving them.
It looks like 4th edition keeps all of these to a 2-page spread, which our layout person would be really happy about.
Yes. But I think that 4th edition doesn't have as much fiction about each of the races, which I actually welcome the extra fiction about the races, especially when you're trying to teach this brand new game to brand new people. I feel like that's actually pretty new person friendly. If I don't know anything about an elf, this book is now I'm not making the assumption that you know what a fucking elf is, or that you've right now if you've seen the cultural like informant Lord of the Rings.
Right.
I am telling you what an elf is in our game.
In lieu of a lot of fiction, it gives you a 1-sentence like, here's what an elf is like. Quick, wary archers who freely roam the forests and wilds. Okay, cool. You are telling me right up front that if I'm an elf, I'm fast, I'm probably good at ranged combat, and something to do with nature. All right, I get all of that from that one sentence. Sure. And then there's like a 1 paragraph that's basically like, elves live in trees, and then and then it has a play an elf if you want ... and then 3 bullet points about what elf characters might be like, which sounds really familiar because that's what the Exalted 3rd Edition core book did. But that came after this, so
sure. Wow. So that's races, and I think that's honestly 5th edition I think does a decent job of presenting the races, and then giving you the information that you need to fill in your character sheet with that race. And then we move on to classes.
Yeah, I think a play a blank if you want to blank is really, really, really good.
Oh, it's my favorite. Like I think that should be in the basic character creation chapter.
Yes.
I think that's where that kind of sentence goes, and then the deeper meaning goes into each individual write-ups. I think is a great way to present that, because if I'm just doing the character creation and I I can flip to those things to get all their like special abilities and stuff, but I just like what is an elf, or what is a barbarian, or I keep saying elf and barbarian, but like what is a monk? Okay.
Right.
Oh,
what is a fighter?
A monk if you want to, play a monk if you want to, punch people in the face and be flippant. okay, play a bard if you want to run around annoying your party and singing songs. You know, like
right.
There are probably better actual sentences than that, but you know, like off the top of my head. So we get into chapter 3, which is classes, and 5th edition actually does a really great job of. There is a table on the very first page. There's some, you know, like a paragraph of introductory text, but there's this table on the very front page that breaks down all the classes, gives a description, tells you your hit die, tells you what their primary ability should be, tells you what their main saving throw proficiencies are, and then tells you what their armor and weapon proficiencies are. So
that is absent here.
That table honestly needs to go in the in chapter 1. That table is misserved being at the beginning of chapter 3.
Yeah, I agree. The 4th edition thing does not do something like that, which it probably should, because that sounds really helpful.
Yeah.
It does have a 1-sentence rundown and what page each class starts on, so that's not bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Then it talks about role, power source, key abilities, proficiencies, implement, bonus to defense. It explains basically how to read what you're about to read. Yep. Then it talks about Paragon Paths and Epic Destinies, which I think probably should have gone last.
Yeah.
And then past that, it is how to read and use powers.
Which is important for 4th edition.
Extremely important.
Less important for
So
edition.
Why don't we just use that as an example? So let's say you're making a game where having and using powers are important to your character types.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, Exalted stares into the camera. Do you think, though, okay, that's sort of an unfair comparison because, like, if I am a cleric in D&D 4th edition, I only have access to cleric powers, right? I can't take anything else. Yep. And Exalted doesn't quite have that.
Nope.
So, like, and Exalt type is separate from power type.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't necessarily know that how to read it has to go in front of the types.
Yeah, I think that if your game has a universal way of presenting powers, like everyone has spells or everyone has like we'll talk about Scion, right? Like everyone has knacks and boons.
Boons, yeah.
Right? So I need to, before I talk about knacks, before I talk about boons, explain to you what you're about to see in this section. And you know, a lot of the Onyx Path books do this, right? Before the boons section, there's a breakdown of how to read boons. What do these words mean? What am I looking at before I start looking at them? So that I can understand them as I read them. And I think having that at your beginning of your, you know, for D&D, for 4th edition, having that before you even read the classes, because the classes give you all the special abilities in that class section.
Right.
And honestly, those special abilities are key. You pick one every fucking level. There's a lot going on there. And
there's
so
a lot
knowing how
going
to
on
read them
there.
and what they mean before you even start looking at the classes is very important. And I think having that there is actually really nice.
Yeah. And it's I do not have the benefit of looking at this for the first time.
Sure.
And even when I was reading this for the first time, I was at the time a diehard Exalted fan.
Sure.
So learning about how powers work was really easy for me.
Sure. Yeah. You know, as much as I love everything that 4th edition did, I do think that the power sets themselves are extraordinarily daunting for a new person to read through.
I would have to agree with that. And please remember that I didn't have a problem with it at the time because I was used to charm sets.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, I was also used to reading through like every single feat in the book, and you know, but there was some. If you wanted to make a character above first level in 4th edition, it was almost impossible because
it's a pain in the ass.
The decision paralysis that sets in from picking at each level, like, you know, like picking abilities every single time, and there's so many different things to read, and you know, we're gonna start with 5th level characters. R.I.P. you. You may as well have one session that's just
everybody goes pick stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So so 5th edition does a similar thing where they describe what it's like to be part of that class. The very first spread has a table that has all the level of like everything you get when you level up, which I think everything since 3rd edition has had that kind of the level table. Tells you a quick build, and I don't know if 4th edition did this, but it is essentially like, here's a quick build that you can do where you put your highest ability score in strength followed by constitution, and then choose the Outlander background and move on with your life.
All right, let's see. I just flipped it open randomly. Ranger. Do we have a quick build choice? There are, so there's creating a ranger, and then it has 2 suggested styles of play, one being the archer type, and one being the 2-blade type, so, neither of them are anything like Aragorn.
Amazing.
But it does have suggested feat, suggested skills, suggested at will powers, suggested encounter power, and suggested daily. So, there is a quick build suggested. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So yeah, that is there.
Cool. So then after the quick build, there's class features, and most classes get some kind of feature at every level. So you have hit points, what your proficiencies are. You have starting equipment. And then you have a breakdown of all the different powers and what they do. And that's pretty much the case for every class. The only thing that that these things don't put in them is the spells themselves, which makes sense because spells are their own entirely nonsense thing.
Right. We can talk about that some other time.
Yeah. So after your classes, then you get into the additional stuff of character creation. Again, you get backgrounds, and so D&D 5th edition introduced this kind of personality background thing where you pick a background, and that gives you some stuff to tie into role-playing your character, and also gives you some extra equipment based on your character's background. And so there's some inspirations, there's some backgrounds, and then there's this whole list of things that are like, oh, I'm going to do a criminal background. I get some extra skill proficiencies. I get some tool proficiencies. I get some extra equipment, and then I can get some kind of some kind of specialty within, some kind of extra thing that helps just define my character. And a lot of this is just role play hooks and reasons to help you, kind of inspire you to how you role play your character. Yeah,
I think 4th edition added those later. I think they're in PHB 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So they are obviously not. I'm looking at one, what I would consider to be basically the core book.
Right, which 4th edition D&D honestly suffered a little bit from, we came up with better ideas during the life cycle of the game.
Yeah.
And we produced these books that are just better than the first books we put out. So, that is a thing that is, not in favor of 4th edition. I think they tried to stop doing that with 5th edition, where the only books they put out for 5th edition now are essentially adventure books. But that's another thing we could talk about somewhere else.
That is also a different topic for a different time. And how I sort of feel like learning from your good start is inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that is, again, maybe that's our next deep dive. I don't know.
Yeah. So
So instead, it has a chapter on skills with a cool piece of art with some adventurers just having a bad time.
Sure. So so then we talk about gear and equipment, and one of the things that I always found very strange in D&D is the separation of basic equipment and magical equipment.
Okay.
So I understand that like half of the DMG is magic items.
Right.
Which is useful, I guess, if you're running the game and you're the dungeon master or the whatever you are, and you're trying to pick loot to give to your intrepid adventurers. Having that available in your book is a good place for it. But when you are the adventurer and you're trying to decide what cool magical item you would like to maybe purchase, now you need another book.
Yeah.
And it's not like the person running the game doesn't also need the player handbook, because they do. So
are the magic items not in?
They're not. They're absolutely not in the player handbook. They never have been, and they never probably will be.
There's magic items in the equipment section in D&D 4e.
Are there?
Yeah. There totally are. I'm looking right at them.
Like a list of magical items?
Let's see if there's a table. Okay, so on page 223, for those of you reading along at home, there's a section that says magic items, and then it talks sort of a general thing about them, how much they cost in gold per level, how to identify them, magic item categories, then talks about item slots, category and price, what they do, a little sidebar on residuum, which is what happens when you disenchant an item. It gives an example of a magic item that is the Holy Avenger, because magic items are basically equipment powers.
Yep.
They were basically evocations. Again, but it came before. And then so on the next page, 228 through 229, which is like 5 pages later, there is in fact a table of magic armor. How much it costs, what type it is.
Yeah.
And then following it up a couple pages later are magic weapons.
Yeah. That's not...
And holy symbols, and rods, and orbs,
and
wands.
Maybe that's because those things have powers, and they decided all the powers, player powers, should be in one book together.
Yeah, maybe they did.
For 4th edition, because it is... In 3rd edition, it is also true that magic items are not in the player handbook. They are in the DMG. And that is also true in now 5th edition, which 5th edition looks a lot like 3rd edition. I mean, it's not, clearly, but it looks a lot more like 3rd edition than 4th edition ever did.
Yeah. Here. See? Here's my... See?
I believe you.
Yeah.
I believe you. You don't need to show me. I believe. But yeah, the 5th edition doesn't... Magic items are a thing for the DMG.
I mean, it's also because I think there was an assumption that every class had some sort of item or useful weapon or item that made them better at doing their thing. And there was an assumption that you would get one as you progressed. Yeah. So, like, holy symbols are in here. Yeah. Rods, staves, wands, tomes... rams and masks are all in here too, and then a handful of other stuff like feet slot items and head slot items, and because also in 4e those increased your saves, so there was also a core assumption that you had and would acquire these items as you went.
Yeah, so now there's the very next chapter after that, like pretty slim equipment chapter. Is customization options. So here's where you get your feats. It also talks about how to multi-class. And the feats are very... I don't even know how you get feats. I don't remember. I think some classes just get them at certain levels.
Yeah, this book has feats,
and then you
ahead between skills and adventure and equipment.
Yeah, feats are... Well, it's because feats are imperative in 4th edition.
Yeah.
Feats in 5th edition are an optional rule. Okay. So I was thinking that some of the classes gave them to you, but I misremember that. They all have, like, essentially, instead of feats, they have just, like, this is the ability that the fighter gets. Feats are... You can choose to use the feat system instead of getting an ability bump increase. you can instead get a feat.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And then there's a list of a few feats that you could take, and then we move into how to play the game.
Yeah, and then that following that here too is adventuring, which is a little bit of how to play the game.
Right. And so this is a pretty beefy section in 5th edition that talks about, like, this is where all that ability score modifiers, how to use ability scores, advantage and disadvantage, which is a new rule for 5th edition, how proficiency bonuses work, how ability checks work, how skills work, what's a passive check, then each individual ability and what it can do, and then saving throws, and then we go into adventuring, which talks about time, movement, how fast characters move, what, environmental things, social interactions, resting, going things between adventures. Then we go into combat, which talks about all the different ways to do combat. It's a pretty beefy chapter because combat is the
whole game.
Part of this game.
It's the whole game.
Yeah, and then we go into magic, and pretty much the rest of the book is spells.
Okay.
It's the very last part of the book, and I actually like that it's the very last part of the book and not before how to play the game, because it's such an optional. Only certain classes have spells, and now here it is at the end of the book. I just flip to it, find my spell, move on. Honestly, if they just took spells, even though it's part of Player Handbook, and made it its own little manual, that would be amazing. And then after spells is some appendices that have things like appendices. So Appendix 1 is different conditions that you can be affected by. I think that's great that that's an appendix, because I think in 4th edition it was listed as they were just in the adventuring section, so a little hard to find. But because it's an appendix, I can just flip right to it. All of the stuff about the gods and the planes of existence and is in an appendix. There's also an appendix on creatures, which is a little interesting to me because there's a whole monster manual.
Right.
So let me see what that appendix
is. That for having a summon or a familiar?
Maybe. Let me get to it. What page is that on? Creature statistics 304. There we go. Yeah. So it's like a bat, a bear, a boar.
It's for shapeshifting. Okay.
Yeah, so it's spells and class features allow characters to transfer into animals, summon creatures to serve as familiars, and create undead. And so this is, if you can make one of these things or become one of these things, we've put rules for you here, which is actually fucking fantastic. Thank you for putting it in this book instead of the fucking monster manual.
Yeah.
So honestly, as a comprehensive player handbook, I think the 5th edition D&D handbook is hands down the best of all the editions, in my opinion. It gives far more information. It makes far less assumptions about what you already know about the game, which makes it more new player friendly.
Okay.
Now let's talk about organization. Now that we've gone through the whole book, let's talk about organization and our opinions on organization. We don't have to talk about 5th edition D&D anymore to talk about that.
Yeah, we're at an hour and 6 minutes.
Jesus, maybe we shouldn't have gone through the whole book.
Maybe we should. I don't know why we thought that was a good idea.
I think it's because you started comparing it to 4th edition, and we really shouldn't have done that.
We shouldn't have done that, but we did. That's
Too
what happened.
Bad.
Let's talk about organization and maybe answer some of the actual questions as bonus content. So but let's talk about is or is not the D&D standard good for new people, which is kind of the question that I had.
Right. So I think there's a couple of things going on in the player handbook that is organizationally, if I am brand new to the game, there's a couple of questions that I think I want to know first. And the first thing I want to know is why, how do I play this game?
Okay.
Because if you're giving me powers and you're explaining, you get this special ability, or you get spells, or you get a bonus to an ability score. I don't know what the ability scores mean. I don't know I don't know how to play the game yet. And so making choices as a character to create a character is actually a little difficult when I don't know yet what any of that means. And so that's something that I've thought about a lot in, if I were going to make my own game, that having, I need to know what I'm picking first. So giving me all the information about races and characters up and classes up front, just the basic, here's what the information is, feels like the best way to do it. I need that setting information. I want to know, what is this game? What am I supposed to be doing in this game? That's going to be in the introduction. I want to know, okay, well, what's available to me to play? What is that? What is it? And then I want to know, how do I play this game? And then tell me how to make a character. So that and not you can tell me how to make a character, but you're going to give me all the character choices. I want to know how to play the game before I see any of those character choices.
Okay.
And I've never seen, the only book I've ever read personally that did that was actually Blades in the Dark.
Huh. Yeah. Okay.
Blades in the Dark absolutely tells you how to play the game first, and then it gives you character options and how to make a character, and then it gives you all the setting. I didn't even know the game had a setting because I read through. I was like, "Oh, this is how you play this game. All right, I'm ready to go." And I'm like, "Oh, it has this really deep setting. What?" So maybe not the setting at the end, but
right.
But that here is what you need to do to play this game, and then here are your character options, and here's how to make a character. I feel, game I don't make game books that do that. None of our game books do that.
You know what? Let me see how Trinity lays it out real quick.
It doesn't.
It
not
doesn't.
Like that.
No, not like that. So we got some inspirational material. We got some fiction. We got a glossary, which is good because sometimes it's jargony. Then we got some more fiction. Oh, it's a lot of fiction. We got a lot going. Whew, that's a lot of fiction. There's a lot of fiction.
I know, right? It's good. I like it though.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the sort of person who's really into reading all that, I bet that's a real treat. But usually when I'm picking up a book, I'm like, let me skip right to the important part. Bam! And Trinity opens after you get through all the fiction, which does set up the world pretty nicely directly to character creation.
Yeah, it does.
It does, yeah. And then attributes... And dice rolling's in there. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get a whole lot of choice in how things are set up. We know this is true. I would have loved to have put the core mechanic, the story path system before character creation. Because right as it is in this book is, the core mechanic and combat have two different chapters. And if I had done those first, and then character creation, and then immediately into the talents chapter, instead it's character creation. It's all of the mechanics of how to play the game, how to run the game, and then it's stuff about the characters you're actually playing in this game. And part of that is because this is a core book that is setting up core information for other books.
Right.
So that character creation section is the character creation section for an aberrant, adventure, assassins, literally anima, literally everything else. And so playing talents in the core book should be is its own chapter because that is the core book's character type you're playing.
Right.
But honestly, I could have served myself better by putting all of the straight up, here's how you play story path, and then here's how you create a character, and then here are talents. And I feel like that flow might have been. It's hard though, right? Because the character creation section tells you all of the main abilities that you're going to have. Explains what a skill is and what an attribute is and what a edge is, and so you get a kind of a feeling for all that, and then the section itself that's explaining how do those things work. But would it be better to know how those things work before you even know which skills and attributes you have available to you?
Yes, that is the question. That is the question I'm stuck on.
It's the question,
right?
Because which, you need all of this information. You need both parts.
Right.
So when you're reading through one and you don't have the other one yet, which is better to be in the dark about?
Right. That's the question. Which we will talk about a little bit more in the bonus content. So if you are not already a patron, go to patreon.com, look for bonus experience, give us $1, hear what other things we have to say. We release extended cuts of all our episodes, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
BXP and the Deep Dive are brought to you by the Misdirected Mark Network. Give me a bing.
Bing.
Thank you. And if you like listening to us talk about mechanics and junk, you should listen to the Misdirected Mark. Chris, Phil, and Bob go live every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to break down and get inside games, game mastering, playing games, and game design in an effort to entertain and inform you. And don't forget that Bonus Experience is sponsored by Nerdy Kepi, which is a cool shop where you can get all sorts of Pride swag. If you use code BXPcast at checkout, you will get 10% off your order, and that is a code that never expires, so you can always go back and buy more cool stuff from them.
Yeah, they are also queer and Jewish owned, small pub, so support local, I say local, but support small businesses.
Yes, support small businesses. Support small gay businesses. And that will do it for now. If you want to send us an email, hey, if you want to propose a deep dive topic, you can shoot an email to bonusexpcast@gmail.com or holler at us on Twitter at bonusexpcast. Danielle, if they want to follow you, where can they find you?
You can find me at daniellelozon.com. I'm also on Twitter as @Impernius. I often don't post there because I don't like Twitter discourse, but I will every now and then be drawn into some bullshit. So expect hot takes and bullshit from me. And you can also follow my author Facebook, Danielle Lozon Harper. Oh, sorry, Danielle Lozon author. Man. And that's just my name. Anyway, Danielle Lozon author. I generally try to post weekly updates of the things I'm working on, and will toss things like writing, all calls, and also just my hot takes about the industry into that Facebook. So if you want to follow me there, you're welcome to.
And I am on Twitter at ZenithSun. Follow at your own risk, I guess.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I think that does it.
Yep.
Everybody get out. Let's
Go.
It's lunchtime. I'm hungry. Let's do this.
Yep. Get out of here.
Change it if you
do this? Really? Fine. Bonus Experience is written and produced by Monica and Ray, and Danielle is here today. And, hey, what about me? Margaret. Fine. You don't give me any credit. I don't care. Our logo and art is by Neno Studios. Find her on Facebook and Instagram. Our theme song is Reuse Noise with the Light, whatever that means, by CDK, and is used under the Attribution Non-Commercial Creative Commons license, whatever that means. BXP is part of the Misdirected Mark Network. But, gaming pun, I don't know, that could get a little bit dicey.